Welcome, everyone. This is the English Department's Homecoming Awards ceremony. Nisha and I have been corresponding on this in the last while and asking ourselves how long this tradition goes back. The answer seems to be a very long ways, but we're not quite sure how far. That will be a research project for some future English PhD. In the meantime, I would like to welcome everyone to an event that will involve a large bell. Involves 3 fabulous undergraduate award winners, 5 recently defended PhD, I would say candidates, but 5 recently defended doctorates out of the department, and a bunch of happy professors who are so gratified to see everybody's work come together so well. And the chair of our department, Ms. Powell, would like to give a few more words on the undergraduate awards.
Just a very few more words. Hello, everyone. Thank you. On behalf of the Department of English, it is my pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to our present and hybrid guests at the 2024 Homecoming Writing Awards and Flash Talks. What we're about to do is honor some of our exceptional students from each end of the English academic journey, beginning with 3 outstanding undergraduate writers and then segueing to some newly minted PhDs from across this department. One of the things I like best about being here at ASU is that while English departments all across, I was going to say the country, but honestly the world right now, are kind of narrowing and retreating defensively into canonical lanes, ASU maintains its intellectual vibrancy. We're a huge department. We have thousands of students, hundreds of staff and faculty, and 6 distinct program areas. To work with this group is an enormous privilege, and to be singled out for excellence within this group is an enormous honor. In just a little while, we will hear some very rapid research pitches from the Literature, Linguistics, and Film and Media Studies here. But first, we're going to announce the winners of our undergraduate contest, which I'm told saw record numbers of entries this year. I'm just going to give you their names, and then we're going to have some people come up and tell you a little bit more about why they're great. For poetry, our winner is Anaís Fernández. For the short story or creative nonfiction, Ichabod Lasman. And for the scholarly essay, Eva Claus. Please join me in applauding each of these students as they're introduced and called up to the stage.
Our poetry winner is Anaís Fernandez. Anaís is a third-year student majoring in English and creative writing with a creative writing concentration on the poetry track and minoring in Spanish. In addition to being a Barrett student, Anaís is also a literary editor for Barrett's Normal Noise magazine and the student manager at Barrett Student Center. Anaís is being honored for 3 poems today: the Abecedarian for Closedmouthgirls, As If Praying, and Anti-Poetica. And I have a few words from the poetry subcommittee on what it was like to read Anaís's poetry, which I would like to share with you. So this is from Sarah Viren on the committee. She writes, "Reading these poems feels a little like gluttony and a lot like flying. To be in their presence is to be reminded yet again that language is a thing of sustenance, a substance that can and does build shoulder blades and cracked tongues, raised lands, and prayers." Today, I believe Anaís will be reading from Abecedarian for Closedmouthgirls, and I'd like to welcome you up.
Thank you so much. I do have to pull up the poem really quick, but thank you to the Department of English and Sarah for those kind words about my writing. I'm so honored to be here. Let me grab the poem. Okay, perfect. Okay. An abecedarian is essentially each line begins with the consequent letter of the alphabet. So, abecedarian for closedmouthgirls. Honestly, she says, like honestly, but in that way, the way she did all corpulent vowels and drunk spaces where consonants should go. Egging the guy on ain't gonna do fuck all nuttin'. She's spilling now. Fermented grape juice all over the table and her fingers, holy blood of Christ spreading, and I shrink towards the back of my chair. jamming my shoulder blades into the slats. Kitty always knew, she says, a smile like her mouth is full of cotton, mouth of slick tongue and nothing good, eyes sliding over to me and locking, nearly popping from eye sockets whose color was quilting into the whites. Right, Kitty? You always knew where to sit when Big Man was home, how to shut the doors soft, huh? I swallow, a violent scrape of cracked tongue against waterless throat, Xing any possible words into splintered wood. Yeah, she says, my good Kitty. And her rubber hands zest my cheek into acquiescence. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and I hope that you can all hear me online, which is rather fitting because the winner of our short story creative nonfiction category, in which we had an enormous number of entries, many of them very fine pieces of writing, but the winner is an online student. Ichabod Lasman, who writes under the name Ichabod C. Kilroy, a splendid pseudonym, is a returning student after a long absence due to its health, and an English major at ASU Online. Its work draws heavily from its lived experiences as a disabled queer person. And amidst huge amount of competition, the unanimous agreement of the judges in this category was that Ichabod's story, Year of the Tangram, should be the winner. In the words of the committee, it is a fine, well-crafted study of a boy and his family struggling to cope with the challenges of autism. The development of the puzzle of the tangram as a metaphor of the boy's emerging sense of identity is especially well done. And I think what especially impressed me about this story is the way that it moved so effectively between the voice of the child and the voice of the mother. So many stories these days just have a single voice and perhaps draw too much on direct experience. But here, there was a real sense of moving between voices and a sense of development. It was a story that worked 12 months and a real sense of the character developing. The tangram is a kind of puzzle which can be put into various different shapes. To begin with, the boy hates it, but by the end, it loves it. And that's a beautiful sense of development. And there was really an idea of getting inside the mind of a neurodiverse child. And that's a real achievement. So hearty congratulations to Ichabod.
Hi, thanks for the introduction. And obviously my huge, thanks to the committee for the award and to the entire English department in general. This is really cool. My name is Ichabod. I use it itself. I actually first started at ASU just about a decade ago in person, but my degree got derailed by some pretty significant health challenges I was facing at the time. So it's really an honor to be back in ASU Online, getting to finish the degree. So my story is called Year of the Tangram, and it's about an autistic boy, his allistic mother, and this nebulously haunted tangram that over the course of a year reveals sort of all the things that have gone wrong in their relationship. So I'm on the spectrum, so obviously this draws on a lot of personal experiences and my personal distaste for tangrams. I kind of think they're creepy. But also, it's worth mentioning that there's this really great passage in Capote's Other Voices, Other Rooms, where Joel wonders what would happen to him had he been transposed into the place of Kai from Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Snow Queen, before realizing that were he in that Kai's place, there would be no one to come rescue him as Kai is rescued. And that combined with, there's a very brief mention in The Snow Queen of Kai solving tangrams, and those are the illusions that sort of provide the basic framework of the story. And I'll be reading from the section entitled December, for despite it being my least favorite month of the actual year, it is my favorite month in the year of the tangram. So, December. These are some facts the boy has learned about the tangram man. He is writing the facts in the margins of his books in code, but they are here uncoded for the progression of our story. The tangram man doesn't talk or otherwise make itself known to anyone but the boy. The Tangram man is always in the Tangram, whether there's a square, or a boat, or a person, or a shape, any shape at all. The Tangram man can see and hear. The Tangram man can move and manipulate itself, but prefers not to be seen doing so. The Tangram man answers most questions with questions. It is snowing every day now. In the snow, in the front yard, the boy draws larger tangrams. Fluffy Bunny and D'Artagnan watch from inside his room, peeking out over the tops of the dead window boxes. He uses a yardstick and a compass to get all the angles exactly right. He starts with the original square, then man falling, and works his way through all the solved tangrams he knows. He feels the man's eyeless sight in every snowflake as he remembers the complex geometries of its form. He thinks he hears its laughter in the crunch of ice beneath his boots. Maybe the man is in every broken mirror, around every sharp corner. The man sweeps into the world through the fractured places, purposes unknown. Friend or foe, real or not real. The boy wonders if there's enough paper in the world to write down the things he doesn't know about the Tangram man. The boy solves the tangram, scuffs it out, and tries again. He stays outside until his cheeks and hands are raw with wind and cold. As he works, the boy begins to pray. He prays that he will successfully recreate the man on a larger scale, and then someone else will notice, as he notices. Someone else will take the burden of investigation from his lonely little shoulders and let him come in from the cold. Someone else will solve the mystery, once he can say what the mystery is. He prays to be seen, to be understood, to be loved. But the only observers of his labors are a pet fish, a stuffed rabbit, and the Tangram man itself. And so whatever the boy hopes to prove to the world disappears on the wind. It is lost in a snowdrift or else pulled under a snow punt. It melts before his mother realizes how long he's been outside and drags him in by the hood of his parka, tears frozen to his chafed face. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm here to introduce you to Eva Claus, who is our this year's winner of our scholarly essay. The essay is entitled Women, Sociability, and Power and Persuasion. Eva is a junior in the Barrett Honors College, pursuing a double major in English and sustainability with a minor in biological sciences. She is vice president of the College Council at the College of Global Futures and works at ASU's Natural History Collections. Outside of school, she coaches speech and debate at a local high school and enjoys spending time with her family and friends. Of her essay, the committee had this to say. This essay provides a detailed and well-written discussion of women's rhetorical agency in Jane Austen's novel. It deftly weaves together scholarly sources and textual close reading to trace how politeness functions as a means for women in Georgian England to give and take power in otherwise constraining social situations. Everyone, please welcome Eva Claus.
Thank you to the department, and thank you all for having me here today. I'm excited to read, so I'll jump right in. The governing ideal of politeness within social circles during Austen's time period informs the way that women influence others within the text. Soile Lavori writes of women's politeness as a way to exercise power when, in 18th century England, political power was not available. Despite not having access to conventional male forms of power, politeness was used simultaneously to assert hierarchical power over subordinates, but also by those subordinates as a subversive means to undermine that hierarchical power. Lavori's approach to politeness portrays it as a regime of power and knowledge that uses discourses to convey feminine and polite ideals to the women of polite society. In this way, politeness is a clear form of influence over other women. Rather than simply being a social convention, politeness provides a unique way to flaunt one's knowledge of proper behavior to other women, influencing them to learn and do so as well. The power of manners within social circles is evident in persuasion as well. Different manners give women different levels of influence. Anne's own politeness is established at the novel's outset. She has, quote, an elegance of mind and sweetness of character, which must have placed her high with any people of real understanding. Although Anne is not valued by her family, which, as Sir Walter and Elizabeth demonstrate through their egoist behavior, do not exhibit real understanding, her politeness gains her influence with others. She quickly becomes favored within the social circle at Uppercross, and consequently becomes much more socially engaged, even going to Lyme with the other young people. Though Anne's politeness is not valued by all, those that do recognize it grant Anne greater influence, accepting her into their social circle. Mrs. Croft's politeness also allows her to express her opinions, earning her power in certain situations. Anne remarks that her manners, quote, were open, easy, and decided, like one who had no distrust of herself and no doubts of what to do. This politeness and openness grants her an opportunity to speak her mind. When Captain Wentworth expresses shock at the idea of women accompanying their husbands at sea, Mrs. Croft replies by stating that women are rational creatures and that, quote, none of us expect to be in smooth water all our days. Mrs. Croft's demeanor allows her to influence others with her opinion. Without her air of polite sincerity, she would not have been able to earn power within this conversation by voicing her opinion and attempting to influence the mindset of Captain Wentworth. As the female characters continually highlight, whether or not a woman is considered polite determines the role she has in her social circles and the amount of influence she is allowed to possess. Despite their lack of political power at the time, women still advanced in their attempts to exercise more influence in the public sphere. As they further attempted to gain power in the 18th century, their visibility, their economic influence, and their political claims disturbed many people, prompting a concerted effort to more fully circumscribe them within the home. Yet even with these attempts to confine women and therefore limit their power, women were still able to experiment with newfound influence, particularly through education. Advocates for women's education at the time, such as Wollstonecraft, argued that women being imbued with reason was necessary to protect them from predatory men. This reason gave women a greater sense of agency over their own lives. With this newfound knowledge, women could gain power by making their own choices about whether or not they should trust a potential suitor who often had his own selfish interests in mind. Educated women were also able to gain more influence within their households. Women with an education could serve as better partners for their husbands and gain influence by giving them advice. Susan Kingsley Kent points this out by quoting Hannah More, an English writer at the time, who says that men want companions, not artists. Quote, a being who can comfort and counsel him, one who can reason and reflect and feel and judge and act and discourse and discriminate, one who can assist him in his affairs, strengthen his principles, and educate his children. Educated women were able to provide this counsel, deepening a sense of companionship between man and wife and allowing women to exercise influence over their husbands. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of our undergraduate award winners. It's been such an honor to have you here. We are transitioning to the second part of our program, which is our Flash Talks. This is, I believe, the first year that the tradition of postdoctoral Flash Talks has begun. So we have an old tradition and maybe a new one, or maybe this is a one-time only. 21 doctoral students are graduating from our program this year in the fields of literature, writing and rhetoric, linguistics, and English education. 5 have graciously and good-humoredly agreed to join us today for our celebration and challenge, namely to say something about what have been multi-year, sometimes multi-hundred-page projects in 5 minutes. I want to thank you all in advance for joining us for this, and just note that the work of the 5 students who are about to step forward, who will be introduced by my colleague Miriam Galarreta and kept on time by my colleague Melissa Free. Their work represents not only the areas of literature, linguistics, and writing and rhetoric, but these projects represent scholars who have forged interdisciplinary connections with the program in Film and Media Studies, with the School of International Letters and Cultures, and the School of Geographical Sciences and Urban Planning. It takes a university to produce a PhD, and I hope you guys will join me and the whole university in celebrating 5 of our young researchers as you complete this major milestone in your scholarly careers. We are starting with Shawn Mitchell, and you're going to give the introduction.
Yes. First is Shawn Mitchell. His talk is entitled Gotta Catch 'Em All, Theorizing Pokemon as a Rhizomatic Franchise. Shawn P. Mitchell successfully defended his doctoral dissertation on October 25th, 2024, completing his PhD in Writing, Rhetoric, and Literacies at Arizona State University. His doctoral work focuses on film theory, media literacy, and Pokemon. Shawn is currently a tenured faculty head of post-production track at Scottsdale Community College, and his creative work includes Oliver Stone's Fidel Castro documentary, Looking for Fidel, Leonardo DiCaprio's environmental documentary, The 11th Hour, films produced by multiple Academy Award-winning editor Pietro Scalia, and regular work on PBS's flagship news show, The News Hour. His films have won awards at festivals including Cannes, Cine Vegas, and the Orlando, Nashville, and St. Louis film festivals. Before coming to ASU, Shawn earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Delaware and a master's degree from the University of Southern California School of Cinema and Television.
I'm going to ring the bell once now as a deterrent. So this is what will happen. No, seriously, this is what will happen after 5 minutes, and hopefully we won't hear it again.
Fear the bell. Yeah, that's scary. I don't like that. Okay. Hi, everybody. So my dissertation research focused on Pokemon. If you asked me years ago when I started my track down my PhD path, I would have never thought I was going to study Pokemon. I feel kind of foolish standing up here right now telling you I spent the last few years of my life studying Pokemon. However, I could not get away from the topic. Pokemon is the most profitable entertainment franchise in human history. It has been subject, it's faced papal edicts. Numerous Muslim imams have placed fatwas upon it. According to one piece of research, Pokemon Go alone has added 2.8 billion years to the lifespan of United States citizens. And the center of my research was, why is Pokemon so popular? How is this franchise such an endemic and important part of our media? And the other half of it is, it's a franchise that's had almost no academic study. But what academic study is that it has faced is academic study that basically is saying it's a fad, it's going away. Here we are 25 years later, and we still have Pokemon with us. So when I started my journey to see, find out more about Pokemon, of course I went to the predominant literature to see what type of work is done on defining franchises, multimodal media groups, and the previous work did not really explain Pokemon, didn't explain it at all. But a lot of the work suggested that possibly the idea of a rhizomatic system, might be the better way to explain Pokemon. My original dissertation question was going to be, I believe that Pokemon's rhizomatic organization principle explains its popularity. However, my committee very clearly told me, you have to define that Pokemon is a rhizomatic system before you can use anything with it. And it took me more than 200 pages to define that Pokemon was a rhizomatic system. So that became my topic. Hey, what's a rhizomatic system? Rhizomatic systems are an idea that comes from a pair of philosophers, Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, in a book called 1,000 Plateaus. The idea is it creates, or it's a way to identify or examine multi-network systems, a paradigm that organizes them. They originally created it as a way to define the human psyche and large political groups. It was a term called schizoanalysis, a way to look at how the human mind is connected. The idea of this rhizomatic system is connection. Every point connects to every other point. The points do not have to be the same point. There has no beginning or end, that it's always a middle. For us, that means there's no canonical text. Everything has an equality to it. Very different from Western media. A signifying rupture means we can break this rhizome and recreate it. You don't have to have all of the same text in the rhizomes. Cartography is we got to draw a map. Decalcomania is the idea that there's also a tracing on a map. So one of the things I did is here is a map of what the Pokemon rhizome looks like. What's interesting for us is that the idea is this is the map you draw, and as the various audience interacts with these texts, that is the decalcomania. That's what's drawn upon it. It got rotated. Use your imagination. Hey, big thing that I want to talk about is the first point, the connection. And I think it's the most interesting or useful thing that came from my research. What is the connecting point that defines all of the points in this franchise connecting? You can't just say that it has a textual element. That would be saying, hey, every novel that features humans in it forms a rhizome. I don't think that's true. It's not there. It's got to be more than an element. It has to be something deeper that redefines the text as they link together. What I found is all of the Pokemon texts have one element in it, which is battling. They also have training and catching, which are interconnected in the way the Pokemon franchise works. How do you catch Pokemon? You battle them first. What do you do after you catch them? You train them. Why are you training? So you can battle and catch more. They're all basically the same thing. And what's most interesting about this is these ideas of battling, catching, and training, when you see that element in one text, it doesn't necessarily hold that much value. When you see these elements repeated very differently in what is not hundreds, but thousands of texts, they create new ideologies and themes that are not inherent or part of the individual text, but only become apparent when the texts start to connect, which is the valuable part of this. So, why do we care about this? One, I think it's worth it just so we can understand Pokemon better. I think that alone is worth it. Pokemon is worthy of studying. Other thing, and what I think is more interesting for the world of film and media studies, is it does help us understand other franchises. We absolutely are seeing a move in Hollywood franchises, which is a move towards what we call cinematic universes. Oh, the bell. Bibliography. Okay.
Our next speaker, Iqbal Azhar. The title of his talk, Investigating the Madurese Orthography Debates, Linguistic Realities and Potential Solutions. Iqbal Azhar is a PhD in Linguistics and Applied Linguistics program at Arizona State University's English Department. He also serves as a research analyst at the Center on Narrative, Disinformation, and Strategic Influence within the Global Security Initiatives at the same university. Prior to his doctoral studies and role at NDSI, he was an associate professor at the Faculty of Social and Cultural Sciences, Universitas Trunojoyo Madura in Indonesia.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to present my research titled Investigating the Madurese Orthography Debates, Linguistic Realities and Potential Solutions that I defended on October 25, 2024. My research aims to explore the long-lasting debate surrounding the implementation of the latest Madurese language orthography, because despite being spoken by over 30 million people, the Madurese language, which is primarily used in Madura Island of Indonesia, is still doesn't have a standardized orthography system to accurately represent its spoken form. Because of the presence of the debates, the absence of the accepted orthography system has led to inconsistencies in how the language is taught, documented, and preserved. My research seeks to identify root causes and propose solutions for orthographic reform and standardization, drawing on the perceptions of and also the collaborative efforts of Madurese stakeholders. My data were collected from June to September 2023 through a questionnaire comprising 33 questions on various aspects of Madurese orthography. The survey involved 263 participants, including language experts, educators, policymakers, practitioners, and community members. My study reveals at least 6 primary causes contributing to the orthography debates. The first one is the Madurese distinctive phonetic characteristics. Second one is influence from Indonesian and national standards. And then the third one is sentimental association, political interferences, and then local government reluctances, and the last one is some local prejudices. My study recommended adaptive strategies such as improved dissemination, media collaboration, and enhanced visibility in digital platforms like Google in order to advance the orthographic reforms. The implications of my study are first, it enrich existing theoretical frameworks like revisit concepts such as orthographic dualism and orthographic competition, and then it also reveals sporadic and ad hoc orthographies, and then propose new evaluation methods for orthography reform, and introduce the RIPA principle, which are derived from the word representative, participative, and adaptive within the octahelic framework. The octahelic model is actually a collaborative framework involving 8 key actors which can support a community-based orthography reform in Madura and also in Indonesia. Practically, my findings provide insights for policymakers addressing the ongoing debates with a multi-dimensional analysis of stakeholders' aspiration to reduce tension surrounding the orthography debates. The recommendations aims to provide a holistic approach for timely and effective orthography implementations, contributing to the preservation and resilience of the mother's language and also Indonesia in the future. Thank you for providing me with this golden opportunity.
Our next speaker, Joshua Horton, Left of Center, Punk, Publics, and Disruptive Strategies. Joshua T. Horton is a newly minted PhD, earning his doctorate in literature this past April. His dissertation is entitled I'm a Lexicon Devil, Punk, Parapublics, Publishing, and Other Disruptions. He was awarded the Catherine C. Turner Dissertation Fellowship while at ASU and won the Critical Theory Grad Essay Prize this year. His expertise is in 20th century American literature with an emphasis on critical theory and sexuality studies. His research engages the intersections of gender, sex, and sexuality in punk, music, culture, and literature.
I had to change the name of my presentation because someone already wrote a book with the same title and I didn't want to get in trouble. Okay, thank you. This is Left of Center, Punk, Publics, and Disruptive Strategies. I'm Dr. Joshua T. Horton. I first became interested in punk as a literary form when I was getting my master's. And one of the first questions I had was, how do I decenter the straight, white, macho, exclusionary reputation that punk has built itself, especially in the 40 some odd years since its first inception? But also, how do I categorize something as amorphous as punk, something that continually needs to change its strategies? So I decided that the public was a good way to think about it. Publics are centered around discourse. Publics are very rhizomatic. And so I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll start with style. So style, we all know that punk is known for its monstrous aesthetic, incorporates kink gear and other things from Vivienne Westwood's Sex Shop, sort of was the original look. But it's meant to be subversive, off-putting, it's meant to signal some kind of danger. And so in terms of punk being a public, I thought, well, maybe punk is a counter-public. But that doesn't work, because a counter-public is a group that is in opposition to the dominant culture. But what sort of defines a counter-public is there's some sort of emancipatory end. Punk's only goal really is to disrupt. And what is the end of that? So then I thought, well, these elements of punk that are meant to be subversive and scary become absorbed into capitalism, into the dominant culture. As a response, punk has to change its strategies. It has to continually adapt itself in order to continue to be monstrous to the dominant culture. So I thought that sounds kind of like a parapublic. Well, no one had come up with parapublic, so I thought, well, now I've come up with parapublic. I should write a dissertation about it, right? So it uses these shifting strategies in order to continue to make itself opposed to the dominant culture in order to push back against the tendencies that a dominant culture has to oppress. So because the public is formed around discourse, I thought, well, what are some punk discourses aside from songs, album covers, concert posters, t-shirts, that sort of thing? The first thing that came to my mind is, of course, the zines. So zines are small, self-produced, self-published, self-distributed little magazines. They can be about anything you want. They're not subject to the kind of censorship that people of color, women, queers were had to deal with in order to have their ideas presented. They allowed for a non-capitalist exchange of ideas. They also very nicely embody punk's DIY ethos, DIY standing, of course, for do-it-yourself. These are made by punks, for punks, but within the larger punk public, they allow counter-publics to use the strategies of punk, these parapublic strategies, in order to promote their own emancipatory end. And then I thought, is there such a thing as a punk novel? Well, yes. This was the first punk novel written by Gideon Sams, a teenager in England. And as you can see, the original cover has, well, you can't see it there because that's bad, but the original cover of the novel has a picture of John Lydon, Johnny Rotten, with a safety pin through his lip. So we have here an actual body of the text being pierced, being made into a punk object, much like the body of punks themselves, which got me interested in the paratext of both zines and novels. And as far as punk novelists, I decided to focus on Kathy Acker and Dennis Cooper. Kathy Acker is known as the godmother of Riot Girl movement. Kathleen Hanna, the lead singer of Bikini Kill, had a little one-on-one with her, and Kathy Acker said, why don't you start a band? No one cares about poets. Sorry. And then Dennis Cooper was originally a zinester in Southern California. He was a queer novelist. He writes very disturbing, monstrous things, but both of these authors utilize punk's disruptive ethos in order to, in the case of Dennis Cooper, talk about the monstrification of the queer body during AIDS, and Kathy Acker is cool.
Our next speaker is Dr. Emilia Gracia. PhD in Linguistics and Applied Linguistics, is a senior global educator at ASU Global Launch, where she teaches ESL to international students, trains international teachers, designs online courses, and contributes to international business development. Her research interests include LT pragmatics, LT pronunciation, computer-assisted language learning, mobile-assisted language learning, and virtual reality language-assisted learning. Educational technology, teacher training, and ratiolinguistics. She defended her dissertation Friday, April 12th, 2024.
Thank you so much. Wonderful, everyone. So I don't think we have a whole lot of people from applied linguistics over here, so let me briefly explain what second language pragmatics are. And yes, I used virtual reality to teach them, but essentially, okay. Oh, this was the previous one. Okay. Second language pragmatics are, I love this definition, knowing how to say what to whom and when. Okay, so I think anybody in here who's ever tried to learn another language knows that one of the most difficult things about that is this, right? It's not just learning the vocabulary and the grammar. We can all do that. We have resources for that. But it's this aspect that really becomes difficult. and especially for those who are in a study abroad context. Our international students here at ASU are in a study abroad context, right? So being as I've worked since 2013, I've worked in our international English program for learners, I have seen students struggle with that aspect of language learning. We give them 21 hours of class every single week. They know a lot, they can write really great essays, but they're not always able to do this part. And many of them had always said to me, hey, I really want to make friends with native speakers. I really want to make friends with American students. I just don't know how. I don't know what to say. And as I would talk to them about that, I gathered that it was just they didn't know the appropriate way to carry out certain tasks in language. Things that could lead to a breakdown of friendship, like asking about someone's private life politely. How do you do that? Apologizing for being late, right? These are culturally bound tasks, and that if they are not done according to expectations of the people you are talking to, things can go badly, right? Negative social consequences abound. So that was my issue here. And also in pragmatics in general, we find that textbooks, surprise, don't include pragmatic information, and they normally don't include resources for teachers to teach pragmatics. And so I thought, hey, what could I do to help our students learn this aspect of language, this very important aspect of language? How can I recreate a real-life situation where students would have to do difficult tasks like asking for a favor, apologizing for being late, etc., declining an invitation? How can we do that? These are speech act sequences, we call them. How can I do that in a form of practice where they won't have the potential of negative consequences, right? So I said, you know what, virtual reality is the solution, so we're going to go for it. Virtual reality gives students an embodied experience. They actually get to speak and listen and converse in an environment that they are enclosed in. And so what do we actually know about pragmatics? So a lot of educators might say, oh, well, our students are here, they're going to learn pragmatics on their own. And yes, they learn some, they learn a bit, but they actually don't learn as much as we think they do. There are many things that account for that, such as individual differences. Sometimes students are shy and they just stay within their own language group of other international students, and so they a lot of times don't get the exposure that they need, and sometimes they don't have time also. We have seen through research that explicit instruction has been shown to have a greater learning outcome than implicit. So that's really great news. This means pragmatics can be taught, and when it is, learners learn more. So, as I briefly touched on this before, but we know that instructed groups outperform non-instructed groups. So again, making a greater case for pragmatics instruction in a study abroad context. I then came up with these research questions. So I wanted to know if practicing role-play conversations in VR would lead to improvement in pragmatic performance in face-to-face conversations with native speakers. I also wanted to know if practicing these role-play conversations would be more effective than practicing them face-to-face in person between classmates, because typically, that
was a gentle yes.
Okay, because typically that's what happens, right? And so we did these tasks, and this is a real picture, real student. This was what the software looked like when you're inside. Looks like you're talking to a real person. And this was essentially my experimental and control group. Yeah. The only thing that's different here was they did the role play practice in VR versus not, right? This group just did it with other classmates, as we would in a traditional classroom. What we really found, I actually found very VR positive results here. So we have here that VR is at least as good as a traditional classroom for practice, and we also found that individual practice and feedback, which is what the VR afforded our students, show higher gains in learning than their counterparts. So those who used VR actually mostly had higher learning gains in most of the tasks. So that was great. The VR itself is not the reason for the success, but rather the affordances of the high immersion virtual reality. What it let students do was get into individual, repetitive practice and feedback, which they wouldn't get in a classroom with peers. So, and qualitatively, students liked it. Mostly, they liked it. It was fun, so yay. If you'd like to read the dissertation, there's a QR code, and thank you so much.
Our last speaker, Jimmy Garcia. His talk's entitled Play and the Neoliberal City, Phenomenological Adventures in Chicago's Literary Landscape. He's a current but soon-to-be graduated student of English literature. And although he's born and raised in Arizona, for the last 5 years, he's focused on literature of Chicago from the 19th century to now, attending to how this literature represents the evolution of the city and how recent fictional works critique the rising inequities of the contemporary neoliberal city. When not brooding over neoliberal urbanism, you can find him hiking or biking in the great 48th state. He defended on October 23rd, and he looks forward to his next great adventure, intellectual or otherwise.
Now I don't have to say that wordy title out loud. That's the title of the thing. It did take 450 plus pages to actually express this in a written form, so I'll just condense this down into 5 minutes, and fearing Professor Freeze Bell, I'll go even faster than I was planning to. Start with some introductions and orientations, basic context that gives you an idea of why I was studying this in the first place. First, the historical focus was not so much the 20th century and 19th century Chicago literature, but Chicago from the 90s today and its literature itself. Why? And here we go. Specifically from the 90s to today, Chicago has developed as a prototypical neoliberal city, one in which we see rising inequities and social economic injustices. Typically, the policies of a neoliberal city are like developing landscapes of consumption for wealthier white tenants, definitely improve it, like destroying public housing and replacing it with private housing and other things that make the space a place to realize profit rather than serve the public good. Theoretic background that I used was Derridian and deconstructive play, specifically thinking about a really narrow version where there's a very typically positive perception of play, that it is liberatory and emancipatory, and it's always positive. I was questioning that assumption and using literature of Chicago to determine if that was exactly true. So the methodology to introduce more phenomenological mishmash. Using a phenomenology of fiction, I explored 4 literary versions of Chicago, determining if the manifestation of Derridian play, metaphoric, spectral, the play of an acentric structure, within each fictional world resists Chicago's contemporary neoliberal urban frame. Or to say it another way, how does the contemporary literature of Chicago present, critique, and intervene in processes of neoliberal urbanism? I had so many literary adventures. I have 4. I'm only going to cover 2. I think they're the sexiest versions of what I did. The first one, the other one that we're not going to get to is Chris Ware's really, really wonderful graphic novel, Building Stories. It's exceptionally beautiful, if not excruciatingly depressing. The second one was Leon Forst's 1,200-page epic novel called Divine Days. That covers about 7 days in Chicago's South Side. It's a rambunctious romp. I recommend it if you have a year of your life to give over to a text. But we'll focus on the 2 films by Candyman. The first one from 1992, directed by Bernard Rose, and the second one from 2021, directed by Nia DaCosta. Give some context, Cabrini Green was a housing project in Chicago. That was destroyed in 1995 to 2011, and the history of that destruction was a history of neoliberal policies in the city. The city noticed that the area that the projects were existing in had land values rising around them, and they decided to put profits over people and displace the people who lived in Cabrini Green, destroying the towers even though they've expressed an explicit interest to stay in them. Then the space was redeveloped. It's now a space of posh neighborhoods and those consumerist landscapes that I was describing a little bit earlier. Now, the 2 Candyman films are interesting as forms of black horror films. Black horror films like Get Out or Tales from the Hood are films which critique issues of race and racism in society, making those issues of race experientially horrific for the viewer, and then asking us to be a little bit more critical of them in the same moment. Both of the Candyman films critique the racist spatial dynamics that influenced and animated the history of Cabrini Green itself. And they use spectral play in order to levy their critiques. The specter, of course, is Candyman in this moment, but spectral play definition, the disruption of the present by the return of the unjust, oppressive past. How is the specter used by the films to contest those issues of racism in these societies and of Cabrini Green, and whether or not it actually was useful in contesting neoliberal urbanism? Now, the first Candyman of 1992, its specific critique was of the segregation policies that led to the terrible conditions of Cabrini Green in the first place of 1995. But it doesn't actually resist neoliberal urbanism, it actually abets those forces, because what it did to further its critique was a systematic contrast between the wealthy white spaces of the film and Cabrini Green. What that ended up doing over and over again was making Cabrini Green the space of absolute horror. It also presented blackness and black urban space as pathologically aberrant, other, and something to be feared. So while it does succeed in its critique, it actually helped justify the city's decision to get rid of the towers themselves and displace the people as a form of like urban exorcism. Because if we can get rid of this scary black space in the middle of the north side of Chicago, we can develop for wealthy white people. Now, the second movie, I'll go through this a little quicker, returns to Cabrini Green in 2021, critiquing the actual history of the displacement of the residents and the gentrification of the area. It does so in a much more interesting way. The specter is no longer just in the black urban space. It comes to house itself within the tower complexes that surround Cabrini Green. And then Candyman is used to attack and kill all the wealthy right residents of the skyscrapers. I like the big bell. Overall, play is useless. It is also liberatory. It's also progressive. Things to think about. Don't become beholden to anything that you believe too strongly or any political ideology. You'll probably get burned in the wrong context.
As the head of the events committee, I would like to thank everyone for coming today, for sharing your work across all these fields and areas of endeavor.